9 ways to leave your businesses. Most of the people in this room probably say, all right, I got 3 of them pretty easily. I'm going to leave it to my family, I'm going to sell it, or I'm going to close the doors. And that's true. What we hope to talk about and will talk about this morning is not only the other 6 ways, but also for each of the ways that we discuss to leave your business, what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? So that you can be thinking up front, oh, I was planning to do it this way. That's not going to work for me for X, Y, or Z reason. And so I better be thinking of an alternative. That's a big part of, or conversely, I never thought about that way. And look at those advantages. That's probably a better option for me. So let's begin with family businesses. We're all familiar with them. How many people here are part of a family business? Most. Most of the people. Okay, good. And how many people are second or third generation? A lot. And how many people have a generation coming up through the ranks? Fewer. Okay. And we see that today, don't we? One of the things we see is that our kids have more opportunities very often than we had growing up. And I grew up in a family business. And my 3 brothers are still in the family business. And part of it is because we saw how hard my father worked and kind of didn't want to let him down, knew he wanted someone to go, to follow in his footsteps. The other thing is we just didn't have the opportunities that some other people would have. And the third reason is there's a lot of parents today, maybe some in this room, that have said to me, I don't want this for my children. It's too hard now. Competition's too fierce. It's too risky in this global economy and that sort of thing. So even people that own a family business and have kids coming up through the ranks, all right, decide this is not what I want for my kids, or my kids can do better or have done better. We're selling a business right now, a logistics business. Fella has 2 kids. One's a dentist and one's a doctor. They're not interested. And so that's the way it goes. Now, what are the advantages, though, if you do have a family business? Certainly, you got a legacy here. And we all may know of companies, even in Connecticut, especially in Connecticut, some are on their 5th, 6th generation. Talk about pressure, right? Continuing on. But that's the case. And every family business has a particular culture. And that's important very often to the founder or the current owner and to the next generation, and they want to be able to preserve that. Also, Dad may be thinking, I don't want to spend the next 10 years following Mom around the mall, or vice versa. So I need a corner office, which I'm not going to be able to get if I sell this business to someone other than family members who are always going to keep that office there for me. And of course, the security for family members in a family business. But, like anything else, there are disadvantages. One of the biggest is that if you're going to give, sell, however you're going to move that business to the next generation, there's almost always a liquidity issue, right? You're not going to want to charge them as much. You're not going to want you may lend the money to your kids. They may not want to, or a bank may not want to lend them the money, so that, and even worse than that, if you've got 3 or 4 kids, 1 or 2 of them are in the business where most of your wealth is, if you own a family business, and you've got 2 out, how do you treat the 2 that are out of the business? How do you make that fair? All right? And then, the elephant in the room, the kids that are into business, and I've had many business owners tell me this, they just, I don't think, are going to be able to do it. All right, either because they don't have that sense, that business sense, or more often, they don't have the fire in the belly like I had when I was coming into the business. And they can see that. And they realize that if they make a mistake here, who's going to suffer? Is it really going to be the kid? I mean, whose money's on the line? Who spent 20 or 30 years building up this business? All right? These are very serious issues. And going back to the second one, treating family members equally, even the case or the situation of who's going to lead this business. Is it going to be my very capable and oldest child, who's my daughter? Or is it going to be my son who expects to run this company because he's the man in the family? And I've seen families break up over that. I've seen families break up. I've seen situations where a son will say to his mother and father, if you ever want to see your grandchild again, you're going to leave me this business. True story. Couldn't make this up. All right? Stuff like that happens. Very painful and very difficult, some of the decisions that have to be made here. On the other hand, when it's working, there's nothing better than working with your family and your brothers and your sisters and your parents and having a sense that, all right, this is going on to another generation and we've got loyal employees and everything else. So, another option. Some people around in this room may have partners. And if you have partners, you could sell it to them. There are advantages, as anything else. You know your partner. You know exactly how skilled he is, and you know that he's probably going to preserve the culture of your company, the mission of your company, the things that you guys have tried to achieve together for the last 20 or 30 years. And a big issue when selling any business, maybe the biggest issue, I would have to say, for most business owners is, I don't want people to find out that I'm for sale. Because if the employees find out, they're going to go out and get other jobs. And if my customers find out, they may go out and look for other places to do business. Certainly my competitors are going to take advantage of that. Well, one of the advantages of selling to a partner is none of those issues are going to apply. So that's a big thing. The other is the due diligence, and we'll talk about that. Anytime you sell to an outside party or an outside group, there is very rigorous due diligence. Now, it's not till you get to the end, not till you've narrowed it down to one buyer and they've signed a letter of intent, but after that, there's 60 to 90 days where they get to pick up the hood and look and make sure everything you've told them about your business is true. And that takes time, and it's intrusive. And, of course, if you're selling to your partners, you don't have to worry about that. They know where all the skeletons are. And they don't have to get comfortable with them. They've been living with them for the last 20 years, right? But there's disadvantages. And that is you're not going to get the best price from your partners, generally. They're going to expect that they're going to buy it at a discount. They may not have, depending on the size of your business. You got a $10, $15, $20 million business. They don't have, $5, $10 million lying around that they're going to give you. And what's that mean? That means you're going to be the bank to a large extent, just as you would be if you were moving the business to the next generation. And that's risk at a time in your life when you're trying to minimize the risk. And of course, just as with family members, is this partner or partners, do they have the skill and the fire to continue this business and have it grow and prosper? Now, why would you care about that? Anyone know? because you're going to be holding the notes. Exactly right. This is my retirement here. If this business goes belly up, I'm the guy that loses my retirement. So, number 3, we're going to sell to management. And good idea. Many of the same issues as selling to family members. So the advantage is they're a known quantity, just like my family, just like my partners. I know exactly what I'm getting. These are good guys. And I know that they're going to preserve the company in the way that I've operated all these years. I may very well feel a real sense of loyalty to these people because they got me where I am. And again, confidentiality is not an issue. Due diligence isn't an issue. They know everything about the company. So it's just a question of on one day we pick and we sign the papers, and that's it. Could it get any neater or cleaner than that? Right? Those are all really big advantages, significant advantages. On the other hand, you're not getting any competing bids. And you all are businessmen. When do you get the best price, or if you're buying something, the lowest price? When? So you got a building you want to put up. Do you go to one person and say, tell me what it's worth, or what it's going to cost me to put this building up? They give you a number, you say, okay, start tomorrow. Is that what you do? You get other bids, right? Why? Because the price is going to go down, In fact, that if that first person that gave you the number, if just the fact that he's one of 3 or 4 or 5 is going to make his price go lower. Or you're supplying parts to somebody. You're a manufacturer. And you have someone call you up and says, I need 1,000 of these a year. You're the only guy bidding on it. Just tell me what it's going to cost me. And you're submitting the bid. That's one bid. And then he says to you, here are the specifications. I want you to know you're competing with 5 other people. What's it going to cost me? I think you're probably going to sharpen your pencil. And that's it. You have to expect that. And so there you go. So since there's no competing bids, you're probably not going to get the best price. And then sometimes these get contentious, and management says, oh, well, listen, if you're going to go now after we've given you what we think is a fair price and you're going to go and sell it to someone else, we're out of here. And you run that risk. So sales, you're going to see when we get to another way to leave your business, which is selling to a private equity group, many of the problems that we've just discussed, many of the disadvantages, can be taken care of, surprisingly. And we'll talk about that when we get there. ESOP stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan. The government has passed legislation years and years and years ago to promote this particular concept. Sell the business to your employees. And this gets a relatively large amount of press, and whenever I go to conferences and we're talking about different ways to sell your business, and you've got 3 or 4 people up speaking, the guy that's talking about ESOPs gets the most questions and there's the most interest in it. When, in fact, when you actually go out and look at how many owners decide to go this route, very, very, very small. The advantage is that if you sell to your employees, then you've got a ready market, no confidentiality issues because you can be doing this, behind the scenes. Big advantage is you can shelter most of the gain that you're going to have to pay taxes on in an ESOP. So if we say that federal capital gains taxes are 25%, state taxes another 6%, you're 31% right off the top, any gain that you have. And most of you who own businesses, just about everything's a gain because you started it when it was worth next to nothing, right? And now you're selling it up here. That's all gain. And so that's a big deal. And now, on the other hand, as we're going to, and of course, you get to retain your key employees. They're happy because they get to be owners. Same thing with most of your employees are happy because, in a sense, they get something for nothing, which is part of the problem. Since they don't have anything, who's going to finance this transaction for the most part? Because your employees don't have any money to pay you for this company. You are the owner for the most part. You're going to fund. So we're back to the same problem that we had before, right? This is my retirement. All right, this is my kid's inheritance. And I'm not sure that I want to trust that to my employees. And in fact, that is the biggest reason why owners don't go down this path. Because they just don't have the confidence that their employees are going to be able to think like owners. They're not owners. They've never been owners. And move this company forward or even continue it the way it's been running. They don't want to risk their retirement. The other thing is that by definition, the valuation or the price that's going to be paid for this, all highly regulated by the federal government, cannot include any synergistic or strategic value that you could get if you were to market your company to put it on the market and get competing offers for it. And we're going to talk in just a minute about what that is and what a big difference that can make. So you're sort of stuck with this valuation for your business, okay? Even though there are people out there who would pay significantly more. Can't do that. And it costs money. Every year there has to be a valuation of the company, and there are other administrative costs. So that, for example, if the company isn't earning at least $500 to $1 million a year, out of the question, because the costs are going to be too great to make it worthwhile. Could sell to an individual buyer. The advantage is, and again, this depends on the size and type of your business. So, if you are selling a liquor store, convenience store, restaurant, dry cleaners, individual's probably your best prospect. Not good or bad, just is, right? They're going to be most interested in it. It's something that they can afford. It's not going to sell for a lot. And because it's being sold to an individual, the SBA is going to finance it on very favorable terms for that individual, which is good for you, right? You're going to have to take back some money, but not a lot, maybe 10, 15% that you may have to take back as a loan. And so if you sell to an individual, and of course that individual could be working for you already. So and to the extent that the individual was working for you already, you solve that whole confidentiality issue, you solve that whole due diligence issue, right? Even if the individual isn't working with you, the due diligence is not going to be nearly as rigorous as it would if you were selling to another company or a private equity group or, God forbid, a public company. They'll absolutely drive you crazy. They'll pay the most, okay, but they'll drive you nuts. You do what you got to do. Disadvantage is it generally takes longer to find the right individual, to have that individual go through the SBA process, get approved for the loan, do whatever due diligence they're going to have. It just takes longer, typically. And they're not going to be able to pay more than the financial value of your business. So now, let's introduce that a little bit. When I say financial value, what I mean by that is your business has a certain amount of profit that you take out of it, and that's assuming that, and you have to assume it, that the buyer is going to operate it in the same location that you do and have the same cost structure that you do, which means the rent's going to be the same, taxes are going to be the same. You've got an accountant and a lawyer, and they're going to need an accountant and a lawyer, and you have someone who's paying the bills, right? The accounts payable, and they're going to have someone paying the bills, and you've got someone or maybe two people that are collecting the money, all right? And it could be one person that's paying the bills and collecting the money. But you still got that, and the person coming in is still going to have that. Does that make sense? They're assuming your cost structure, exactly the same. They're not going to be able to do anything different, significantly different than what you're doing. Now, what if, though, there were buyers that looked at your business and said, geez, I already got a payroll person. All right? I don't need their payroll person. Or I've already got some person, or maybe a department of people, who are collecting my accounts receivable, who are doing the billing, who are paying all the bills, who are doing the purchasing for the company. I've already got a CFO that works for me. Why do I need the controller of that company or whoever they have, that's managing the finances? So if the buyer doesn't need those things, what happens to all that money? Any ideas? That you're paying right now for it. But the buyer doesn't need it. What happens to it all? Pardon? Goes in the buyer's pocket. Drops right to the bottom line. Do you think that buyer can afford to pay more than the individual buyer that's going to assume exactly the same cost structure that you have? Right? A lot more. I've seen just the synergies, and those are all called synergies. Synergistic value means the day after the closing, I'm going to save this much money because I'm already doing or have people doing this, and this. And it's going to drop right to my bottom line. Sometimes you may have a buyer, and sadly, this is one of the things that happens in the Northeast. We have high energy costs in the Northeast. We have high workers' compensation. We have high rates. We have more regulation in some of the southern states. All right, and so when you higher labor rates, when you add all of this up, many of the businesses that are struggling here could be sold to someone in another state, and now they don't even have the occupancy costs. They're not even paying the rent or the taxes or a plant manager if you have a plant. They're already paying for those things. They just fold it into their operation. Or maybe it's someone still in Connecticut, but larger than you. You're using 5,000 or 10,000 square feet, and but they don't need anybody in your office. So they look and they say, oh yeah, but it's only 5,000 manufacturing. feet that the person has, and I have some of the same machines that are under capacity right now. So I got to move some of their machinery in, take me another 2,000 square feet, and look at the money that I save that this seller is paying in rent and taxes and electricity, right? And heat, to heat the building, light the building, things like that. All that falls to the bottom line. Those are all called synergies. Right after the closing, I've seen that be, in some cases, literally $1 million. That depending on how big the seller is, right? And or $500 or $100,000 or whatever it is. Big deal. Then you've got another kind of buyer. Forget about synergies. Strategic buyer. Someone that buys and says, yeah, I know I'm going to get some of these synergies. That's not even why I'm buying this business. And let's move on. Strategic or synergistic buyer. That's what we're talking about now. All right? Yeah, I'm going to get some synergies. That's not the big deal for me, though. There's another reason why I'm buying this business that makes it a lot more valuable to me than it would to a family that's operating it, the employees, if you're going to sell to your employees, the management, if you're going to sell to the management, an individual, if you're going to sell to an individual. Give me an example. Anyone? What could be a strategic reason why you would want to do that?
Oh, so you can immediately enter a market that you've been thinking about or that makes sense, that you haven't done in the past?
Haven't done in the past. Good example. And let me tell you, true story, this happened to me a few years ago. We were selling a distribution company. And when companies are bought and sold, very often people talk about the price as a multiple of earnings. Okay? I'm simplifying it a little bit, but not a lot. Multiple of earnings. How much does a company throw off? And if it throws off $500,000 and the multiple of earnings that businesses like this typically sell for is 4 times, then 4 times 500,000, business should be worth in the neighborhood of $2 million. Make sense? Because you got the earnings. That's why the synergistic buyer can afford to pay more. Because if the synergistic buyer can increase those earnings from 400 to 600, because it saved, right, 2 people and some other expenses, well, they can afford to pay 800 more, 4 times the extra 200, 800,000 more, right? And if you raise the earnings, and it just keeps going up and up and up. All right. So that's the synergistic buyer, and we get that. Now, strategic, and I'm going right back to what this gentleman just said. You have some strategic buyers who have already made a decision at the beginning of the year. We need to do this, this, and this. The only question is, what's the best way, including cheapest, for us to do it? And my firm was selling a distribution company. And distribution companies generally sell for a multiple of 4 to 5 times earnings. In this particular case, I said to the owners, I think you're going to sell for 5 to 6 times. And there were reasons for that. And they said, okay, that sounds good. And we go to market. And they had $2 million in earnings, roughly. So significant, right? 4 to 5 times is $8 to $10 million for the sales price. Someone came in and offered 9 times. And it wasn't the synergies. 9 times. Well, that's 4 extra times. 4 extra times is $8 million that they overpaid. Why would they do that? That's crazy. Unless you understand the strategic reasons that this particular buyer had. And in this particular case, the buyer was a national company, and they had 14 locations around the country. And in distribution, okay, it's not like manufacturing in the sense that, particularly for this kind of distribution, it's not like manufacturing where you could just mail it all. These were the kinds of products that you had to be close to your customer because you were consulting to each customer as part of the distribution process. All right? They had 14 locations all around the country. They did not have a location in the Northeast. And they needed a location in the Northeast. Even more particularly because they knew that their company would be worth a lot more if they had coverage throughout the country. All right? Now, maybe they were even thinking, and again, I'm not privy to everything that they were thinking, but maybe they were thinking of having an IPO, right? Going public. And if they were to go public, analysts would look at the company and say, well, good company, but look at they're leaving out 20% of the country, that they can't sell to because they haven't got a location there. They haven't got the infrastructure there. This company was one of only two in the Northeast that were the right size and that distributed almost exactly the same products, and they weren't getting another chance at it. They knew that. They did what they had to do. They were in competition with 4 or 5 other companies. They couldn't afford to lose it. That's a strategic buyer. Okay? So in this particular case, the strategic buyer was doing it for the location. In other situations, strategic buyers may be doing it for the product line. All right? I'm selling these products here. Boy, if I could get into that product line, which is related to mine but differently, but the same customers that are buying that product line buy my product line, and vice versa. Well, look at, I've got 3,000 people that I know I can walk into the door anytime because that company's part of mine now, right? And my salesmen, I don't even need my salesmen or theirs because my salesman can do that, or their salesman can do that for those companies, and we can cross-sell so that both companies, right, the company I bought and mine, are going to sell a lot more. They're selling my products to their company. I'm selling their products to my customers. And we all know it's a lot easier to sell to an existing customer than it is to go out and find a customer. So that's all it is, another strategic reason to buy. I want that product line. Or I am a manufacturer. I have this situation right now. Just met with someone about, I'm going to jump down here, see if this works. So I'm working with a manufacturer right now, and he's having a heck of a time because he can't seem to, and he's got 2 problems. First problem is he's got a customer concentration issue. And what that means is he's got 1 or 2 customers that are responsible for 80% of his revenue. Buyers hate that, right? Day after the closing, that customer walks away. What did I buy? And the second problem he's got is because he's a contract manufacturer, he doesn't have any control really over where those customers go, right? And if the customer decides to go overseas, he's out. If the customer decides that he's going to go to another company, he's out. So that he's got to keep his margins razor thin to keep that customer base, right? So he comes to me and says, geez, what do we get? No, take that back. Came to CONNSTEP. And CONNSTEP said, well, you could solve this problem if you're willing to. And he said, how can I solve it? He said, well, buy a product line. Buy a product line that's currently being manufactured somewhere else, right? But if you own it, who gets to decide what where it's being manufactured? You do, because you own it. And who gets to decide what the margins are? You do, because you own it. And is it ever going to go away from you? No, because you own it. That's a strategic reason for this manufacturer to buy and pay more for that distributor or for that retailer, right, of a particular product line than someone else would have. Management of that company, that target company, can't compete with him. An individual can't compete with him in terms of what they're going to pay. So the advantage is, if you are leaving your company, you might want to look for that synergistic and strategic buyer, because that's your best chance to get the best price, if you can find one of those. And another good thing about them, most of these strategic buyers, they'll pay all cash for minimal amount of money that you have to take back. Minimal. They also will, they're probably going to be successful because they know what they're doing. In fact, they're already successful in their own business, which is why they can afford to buy you. Disadvantage is, though, like anything else, the M&A process meaning, a firm like mine is going to first identify, look at a particular company and say, what are the strategic and synergistic opportunities here? And then look nationwide and say, which buyers would have the most opportunity with this company? And then, next step is, let me find 5 or 6 of those standing at the end and put them in competition with one another. That's how you get the highest price. All right, and but it takes time. That's where 6 to 12 months comes in. Then, loss of company, culture, mission, because let's face it, you sell to a strategic buyer, you're selling 100% of this company. You got nothing to say. They may close your plant. They may fire your employees. They may, it's big company now. They're not going to operate it probably the way you do. They have no loyalty to those people that you have loyalty to. And I can tell you another story. I've got a manufacturing company right now that we're marketing. And this company, to a strategic buyer, is worth $20 million all day long. And I told the owner that. I said, but the company that's going to pay the most is likely to move your company and move it farther away than where your employees are going to be able to go and work. So they're all going to lose your job. He's already said to me, not going to happen. Don't even want to talk to those guys. In fact, we had one who was kind of close and who was trying to say, well, I'm not sure. Maybe we could operate here, and things like that. The potential buyer left the room and he said, I'm not selling to that guy because I know what he's going to do. And I'm not doing that to my people. And he'll wind up selling his company for about $4 or $5 million less. It's his choice, his company, right? But that gives you an idea of how much money could be a strategic, synergistic buyer could pay more than another buyer. So private equity groups are firms that take people's money, large investors, right? And they say, you invest your money with us, give it to us, and we'll invest it in companies, and we're going to give you a 25 or 30% return. Whoa, that sounds pretty good. Now, it's riskier, but we're going to give you 20. And how do they do that? They do that by buying companies, holding them for 5 or 6 years. Those companies that they buy called platform companies because they're big enough. And the strategy is, I'm going to buy this company, could be distribution company, manufacturing company, service. I'm going to buy this company, and then I'm going to grow it 2 ways. I'm going to grow it organically because we're very sharp business people, and we'll bring in the marketing, and we've got the resources, bring in marketing specialists and CFOs and things like that. And we're going to grow it through acquisition. We're going to buy up little companies, and we're going to combine those with our company, and we're going to buy those little companies at a multiple of 3 maybe. But when we go to sell this big company that we're going to build with audited financials and a real management team and everything else, we're going to sell for about an 8 multiple. So you can see, not only are they making money along the way, not only are they growing earnings, but when it comes time to sell, they're going to get 5 times more than any of these other guys sold for. All right, that's what they do. And so if you're looking, and again, depends on your company. You could be sold to a private equity group as a platform company, which means the bigger company, right? Or an add-on. We're going to talk about the platform company, and which means that your company would have to have at least $1 million in earnings. But if it does, then they can solve, selling to a company like this, can solve a lot of the disadvantages of selling to family members, partners, management team. And you say, well, how does that work? Here's how it works. I'll give you an actual example. Propane company that sold propane and other gases in southern Connecticut. Very successful company. And the problem that the owner had is he had a son and his company was worth maybe $20 million. And he had a son, very competent, very good, running the company for him for all these years. And he had 3 other kids out of the business. Son wanted the business. He wanted to go forward. He had plans. I could grow the business and this and that. And Dad said, yeah, but where are you getting $15 million to buy me out so I can, retire and treat your siblings the way I'm treating you? Couldn't do it. Private equity group comes in and says, whoa, this is an industry and a company that we really like and that we could grow. So here's what we'll do. We'll buy this company, and your son over here, he can keep 25% of it. We'll buy 75% from you, Dad. And so now, Dad's a happy guy. He gets his 75%. He can retire comfortably. He's got money for his other kids. And son's not so sad either, because while he's only got 25%, he's got partners now who are very sophisticated and who have all kinds of money to help him grow this company to be even bigger. And they like the fact that he's got the fire in the belly. He knows the industry. He's been doing this all his life, right? Same thing can apply, think about it, to your management team. If you got a management team that's got everything but money, private equity group comes in and says, whoa, we can take care of that. Okay? We've got everything but a good company and a good management team to run it. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to buy this company from you, and we're going to give your management. You got 3 people here, really strong managers. We're going to give them 3% each, and we're going to allow them over time at a discount to buy another 2% each. So now they've got a stake in the company, 15%. They're going to make all kinds of money when we sell. And what we know is they're all going to stay, right? And we're going to incent them, give them bonuses and stuff. They're all going to stay. They're all very good at what they do, and this company won't miss a beat. See? Everybody gets what they want. Family, sale to management, partners. 3 partners, 2 of them want to retire, and one of them says, okay, but I can't buy the two of you out. Private equity group comes in and says, keep your third, we'll take the other two. Now, worse, they're going to be sure that they got the right partner, clearly. But you can see how private equity, right, how private equity can facilitate the sale. Now, even if you're a smaller company, and why would you want to deal with a private equity group? Because they've already got a company in your industry, and we know two things about them. First is they got plenty of money to pay you, all right? Not what you want, but what they want to pay you, which may be more than you can get from anyone else. And the second reason is we know that they have a mandate from their investors to acquire other companies in this industry and grow in that way. Okay? So they could be a very good buyer. And in a sense, they think about it. So let's just take the propane company, because this is what happened. This is how I became familiar with the propane company, this particular propane company I told you about. I was selling this little propane company over here. Not just propane, all kinds of gases. So I was selling this little one over here and contact this private equity group and say, Jace, you're in this industry. How'd you like this little one over here? I see you've got places around it. Now, I knew that they would be interested in acquiring him because that's their mandate, right? Growth through acquisition. And I also knew that they had plenty of money. And did they turn out to be the best buyer? Yes, they did. Thank you. See how that works? Even though this company over here didn't have anywhere near $1 million in earnings, that's okay. They could afford to pay more. And, well, there you go. There you go. Oh, and by the way, so let's say you're an owner and you bring this private equity group in, and the private equity group lets you keep a third. Or in this case, the son kept a third. You get a second bite out of the apple, don't you? You took money off the table and you sold to the private equity group the first time. You continue to own the third. And 5 years later, 6 years later, when they go to sell this company, much larger, much stronger, better earnings, all right, better multiple, you could get more for your third than you got for the 2/3 the first time. But you really reduced your risk, didn't you? Because you took 2/3 of your chips off the table to begin with. Voluntary liquidation. There we go. Voluntary liquidation. So you're voluntarily deciding that I'm going to close the doors. Why would you do that? Any guesses? Go back to 2009, 2010. I can tell you a ton of construction companies did that. Voluntary liquidation. Why'd they do it? They had no business. No one was building houses, buying houses. They had no money coming in the door, and they had all these loans and all this equipment that they paid for, right? Money's just going out, 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 out. No money coming in. What's the only thing they could do? Sell off the equipment, right? Pay off the loans, and keep the rest. Otherwise, they're just paying. It's voluntary liquidation, right? They had no choice. Another voluntary liquidation I'll tell you about. A company I represented happened to be a large landscaping and snow removal company. And the problem that the guy had is he'd had some great years, and instead of paying the taxes, what he'd do is he'd buy more equipment. So just so he wouldn't have to pay the taxes, because you know how you get that $100,000 deduction, right, on any equipment. You get that one-time deduction. So to depreciate it. So he kept doing that, and he gets to a point and he says, I want to retire. So I'm looking at his business and I'm saying, whoa, you got way more. He said, I know, I got too much equipment. And I say, and you got this Taj Mahal. I know, because I was making good money, so I built this Taj Mahal to keep my equipment in and stuff like that. And I said, no one is going to want to assume the Taj Mahal and assume all this equipment. So here's my suggestion. You sell the Taj Mahal to someone else who would really want a Taj Mahal for other purposes. You sell your accounts, which is the real value in this business because it was a commercial snow plowing and landscaping business. So it had accounts with Pratt and Whitney and Toyota by the airport, and all of these big companies and these big locations. So I said, you sell those, and you say to the person who's buying, I'll give you whatever equipment you want here to go with it. You got to pay me for it. And then all the rest of the equipment you put up for auction. That was our strategy, and it worked. Sometimes it does. And he got a real good price for his building. He got a real good price for the accounts, real good price for the accounts. And he was able to liquidate 2/3 of his equipment and got a good price for that. That happens. And here's the last slide. No, it's not. Involuntary liquidation. Oh, big advantages. Don't have to plan for a thing. Right? Don't have to worry about how much you're going to receive. Whatever you got, you got. Okay? And it's short. Disadvantages. Well, just the embarrassment alone would stop me. But that, depends on the owner. All right? I'm going to leave you now with two things. First, I tell my kids this all the time. And out of the 5, there's one that listens. It's always easier to solve tomorrow's problem today. So if you're sitting here thinking, I'm not going to do anything for 2 years, okay, you're already behind the 8 ball. You're already behind because you should be planning 3 or 4 years ahead. If you're going to sell your company, you should be planning 5 years ahead if you're going to transfer your company to within the family or if you're going to do an ESOP. Okay? That's just what it is. And so you have to prepare. And there are many ways that you can do it. CONNSTEP can help you do it. If it's a family business that you have and there are family business issues, or there are consultants that I or someone at the business like I do can recommend to you and help you through that. Don't try that at home. Family business transition, all right? You're going to do it yourself. Boy, it's dangerous. All right? And you need to bring some objectivity into the process. That's just a fact. You need to bring some objectivity into it. You're not objective, and God knows your family members aren't. All right? So, but there are ways that you can do it. Prepare, prepare, prepare.